This is a very interesting paper by Professor Chandrasekhar Ranade. Professor Ranade teaches at the Stanford. The paper many of you would have read by now, The Future of Inclusive Growth, Similar Patterns in India and Rest of the World. It's published some time back in Economic and Political Weekly. It aligns so closely with what we have been hearing and learning in the past several months in the India development debate paper with Shailajan sir. Now let me pick up this quote from Professor R. Radhakrishna Garu. Professor Radhakrishna is a very eminent academic. This paper itself is published at a seminar, presented at a seminar in honor of Professor Radhakrishna few years earlier. And the paper quotes Radhakrishna as for in this way. And in a way, I found this particular quote, the principle and the theory behind this philosophy behind this quote permeating across the paper. So essentially, the paper seems to have built based on what this quote points to. Let's go together through this. The present pattern of development comprising of high growth, it acknowledges there is high growth, slow expansion of productive employment. It it cushions the job trends that it's not growing very fast, and worsening inequalities, the income disparities, is not inclusive. It defines inclusive in a negative way to say what it is, what does not constitute equality, inequality. This is, it says, is not inclusive, and it may lead to social discord in the long run. Long run, there could be lack of trust in government and things like that. This may be itself a barrier to economic growth. That's the principle based on which the quote from Radhakrishna Garu, which is used across the paper. Now let me quickly mention the overall theme. Probably this is what this whole paper is about. It says there is growth, good, there is growth, it says, but not good enough because there are increasing inequalities, income inequalities. And it argues to say inequality in growth, inclusivity in growth. If you want the growth to be inclusive, if it is inclusive, it means inequalities are low. That means there should be greater focus on agriculture. It takes a particular approach which says agriculture is very, very important. And then it talks of something called non-tradables and says non-tradables are very important, and one needs to stop or minimize leakages in the economy. That's the way it pitches. So let me again recap what I said just now. There is growth, good, but there is inequality, not so good. How do we beat it? We can beat it by more agriculture, more focus on agriculture. Why? With more focus on agriculture, the growth will become inclusive. Why? Because when there is more agricultural growth, non-tradables will come to what it is. Non-tradables demand would go up for that, and it creates a pious circle. It's a good cycle which will go mutually reinforcing, and with less leakages in the economy, your economy will be going on an inclusive track. That's what it tries to say. Let me unpack that in the coming slides. Again, India, world, income, uh, uh, inequality is going up, and more particularly since economic liberalization. So India has moved out from the Hindu rate of growth of 70s. After liberalization, the growth is pretty strong, particularly from 2001 to 2012. The growth has been nearly spectacular. So with all that growth, inequality is still continuing, is the caution. And it talks of evidence. Where is the inequality? It says inequality across country, across regions, stark contrast between some regions which are better while others are poor. It takes this example of our city, Hyderabad, that when you drive from Hyderabad to Pune, how the income inequality or widening income disparities are even seen on the left side and right side of the road. And that's what it says. And then it links it to say world over that's happening. It gives examples of China, South Africa, and United States, and talks of evidence through few quotes, few research studies. Particularly, it mentions also about how top 1% of in national income, how national share of national income being held by top 1% of population. We heard that story for very long, that rich are becoming richer, but at the same time we hear poor are becoming poorer. Probably that's not true. Rich are becoming richer, poor are also becoming better, but the rate at which they are growing is not perhaps really great, and that's something which this paper strongly flags. Picking back from Radhakrishna's quote, uh, which says like there could be in the medium run discord, lack of trust. That lack of trust could go into violence. There are two ways to get income equality. One is like the Robin Hood style. You hit the bad man and hit the rich man and give to the poor man. What we saw as Naxalism in 70s and 80s till late 90s in Andhra Pradesh. When I used to take civil services interview, it was for any student from any candidate from Andhra Pradesh. The default question was Naxalism. Is it a law and order issue? Is it a socio-economic issue? How do you do? Essentially, the question is stop violence for if you want to get a better redistribution. And that's what this paper argues. Say, avoid violence and go for a market-friendly approach. And it rightly points out that if you reduce inequality in opportunity, that's better for the politician is happy to give more opportunities to all than basically taking money from A and giving it to B. That's the kind of a narrative it builds. Then a little bit of a technical content. Here it uses this model called Meller-Ranade model. So this is the basis for this conceptual framework. Simply to put it, this model talks of three sectors. I'm not too sure why three sectors, but it essentially says agriculture, industry, and non-tradable are the three sectors based on which this model is built. And it's a change from something which is an older model. The older model treats the economy as a closed one. It doesn't interact with the world. Probably that's true pre-91 days. And that's the kind of a model, though it's an international model, that could have been more appropriate earlier. But now the new model that they were talking seems to be much more relevant because we do a lot of international trade. Now, in these three sectors, non-tradables, what are these non-tradables? It simply says anything which is not traded internationally, goods or services not traded internationally, is a non-tradable. Industry and agriculture sectors by nature are treated as tradables. Why does it matter, non-tradables? Because the whole story, whole paper is built on this concept of non-tradables and leakages, which I come a little bit later. So it says all unorganized sector is non-tradable. And it says if income is going on, income elasticity for non-tradables is close to 1, which practically means what? If income is going up in the hands of even agricultural people in agriculture, their demand for non-tradables, what are non-tradables? You can say anything, say a barber shop, barber on the street services, or a milk vendor who is selling milk on bicycle, or a idli maker. So anything can be, as a idli shop, everything can be probably non-tradable in a particular context. And this elasticity is high. If you give more money, there is more demand. If there is no more demand, it leads to further, it creates a virtuous cycle in the process, and agricultural income farmers spend more money, more of their money on non-tradables, which leads to be a multiplier. The multiplier leads to real wages in the economy growing up, causing reduction of income inequality. So as we said earlier, it's a kind of a cycle. It says like focus on agriculture, lead to non-tradables demand which goes up, which leads to overall multiplier effect, higher real wages in the economy, and reduction in income inequality. And that's the kind of a model it proposes. What's the impact of agriculture-led growth? Again, it argues that it elaborates a little bit on the same point. It says demand for non-tradables. If you have more agriculture-led growth, there is greater demand for non-tradable goods. Growth in unorganized sector, leading to a multiplier of real wages and reduction of income inequality. And it leads to higher employment. That's something very important. Agriculture is a big employer, and it leads to higher employment when compared to non-agricultural growth. It cautions, saying the current situation is not great, and actually it says like declining agricultural growth, and likely it's likely to exacerbate inequality. Even in the movie from where this picture is taken, that's probably the one which they depicted a lot, that the agricultural growth is depicting, and there's all this social media campaign to say increase focus on agriculture. The paper strongly argues and gives examples around livestock sector. It says there is underutilization of potential. Milk production, not maximum. Meat production, below capacity. Biogas, China learned from India how to use biogas is thriving, but India is not fully making use of potential, is the argument in the paper. It says there are problems in unorganized sector. For example, vertical integration is not there. So you don't have the full chain. Like the way Amul, we get here in Washington, D.C., we eat only Amul dahi, we eat Amul butter. All this is vertical integration. And if that's not happening, the benefits are not reaped. And then it touches this sensitive issue of cow slaughter ban and violent attacks on anyone harming cows. It takes an economic viewpoint to say that there are economic consequences. Impact on meat industry is significant. It also points out to technology related issues. It says in our country, like at the point of when they were writing, probably the genetically modified innovations, there are restrictions. So that could minimize the agricultural growth. And then FDI in retail is not allowed. So FDI, foreign direct investment, is only in wholesale, but not at retail. Therefore, this is also affecting is what it points. And agricultural research, as many of us know, is 0.3% of GDP, which is really, really low. Then it talks a kind of a complete section on leakages and linkages. It says leakages are due to consumer behavior and argues in that tone. There are some very interesting themes that case studies it provides. First case is from the Goli soda to Coca-Cola. So from then you move from Goli soda to Coca-Cola, it says it affects local economy. The linkage effect is diluted, and it affects wages, and it affects poverty reduction. So global biz, no good. Goli soda, better. So though today, if we look back, Goli soda is being marketed by the same companies which market Thumbs Up and Coke. So that's again brings a new nuance in the current environment. It gives a case study of Philippines and says land reforms in Philippines have been remarkable. They created more income in the hands of farmer. But again, they say the farmer is using it in alcohol and gambling, and it links us back to Mahatma Gandhi's prohibition of alcohol and related themes. It also says direct benefit transfer is also tricky. It says it doesn't reach the vulnerable groups. It gives an example of a Dalit boy who is to get a scholarship, but because of the track, the where the household is in the hands of the landlord, is where the check comes or the payment comes, and it doesn't trickle down to the beneficiary. It gives a kind of an example which we all know. It also takes a particular take on the rice straws. It says burning of rice straws is wasteful. Instead of using it as cattle field or for paper production, we are burning rice straw. They say it's not good and it's loss of value added, and on the top of it, it creates environmental pollution. It takes this, it makes a very obvious point, which we all know. There are a lot of poor people in the country and there are a lot of obese people in the country. How can this happen? That's what this question. So on one side, you are wasting food, and on the other side, you don't fare very well on hunger index. And it quotes late Prime Minister Lal Bahadur Shastri, who said, those who have food should go on fast for one evening on Monday, which will solve the hunger problem. So it quotes it and says this is also a point about leakage. These are all leakages questions. Then it says unemployment in rural areas is serious. It affects economic growth. It leads to persistent. Once there is unemployment, it can become even persistent, and it leads to underemployment, which is a form of a leakage, it argues. It gives some examples of positive things. For example, Javaja. This is an experiment I understand is in Rajasthan, where the non-tradables linkage and all is very well established, and it argues to say this is the kind of things which should happen everywhere in all others, and many NGOs should do that. It takes a rather critical view of automation and artificial intelligence. It says it's a threat to employment and it has potential to raise inequality, and it asks us to express caution. So again, as I said earlier, this is a commentary paper. So it's not necessarily a complete research paper. It's more a commentary paper. And finally, what are the key takeaways? It does acknowledge through this, by picking up this particular quote, it says like inclusive growth is a multidimensional concept. It includes poverty reduction, equity amongst groups and regions, open society concept for technology and institutions. It acknowledges that. It says it takes livestock sector as an example and says we in India, we are missing instruments for inclusive development. The title itself is inclusive development. We say that we don't have the instrument. So essentially, we are not doing well, is the conclusion that's coming up from this paper. Leakages in linkage to agriculture with the non-tradable sector is a binding constraint for poverty alleviation and inclusive development. It calls it a binding constraint, this leakages as which needs to be fixed. Even if you have agricultural growth, if these leakages exist, then things are not going to be good, is the conclusion it makes. And finally, it closes by saying that in India, equitable growth can be achieved by following agriculture-led economic growth. Essentially, it is proposing a model where agriculture is the focus and preventing leakages in the economy that constrain the benefits from reaching to the low-income people. It's a perfectly suitable, nice conclusion, appropriate for various audience, whether it is economists or politicians in our country. Probably this fits in very well. So a lot of things that this paper said echoed very well with me, and actually it aligns well with what we were talking. But of course, there are many things which are unanswered or untouched in this paper. Overall, I enjoyed reading this paper and happy to present this.